in the five-sided funhouse. And one of the things I realized is watching, folks around a table, the guy with the bow tie was the one person that everybody just took what he said at face value. So my goal here is not to have you not kind of challenge what I'm about to talk about here today, but at least to kind of start from that place where if the guy learned how to tie a bow tie, everything else is gravy. It is not a clip-on. Yeah, it is, and I'll tell you. Oh, thank you, and it's a perishable skill, as my biceps will attest to. Okay, so good morning. My name is Doug Gray, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a question. How many people here know about a man named Fox Connor? A general, okay. So Fox Connor, he's one of those people, kind of like James Baker to Ronald Reagan, kind of one of those people in the background, affected history. He was the chief of operations for John J. Pershing in World War I. And the reason why I brought this up is I just happened to be reading a book on him. Fascinating individual. So the chief of operations, if you're familiar with the G3, S3, N3, very much into the practical world. Now, he just came out of probably the most mechanistic, industrialized war that the planet had ever seen up until that point. Now, Connor is also known for having mentored George C. Marshall, George Patton, and Dwight Eisenhower, right during and right after World War I. And after this industrialized imbroglio that they were in, he said to Eisenhower, "In all military history, only one thing never changes: human nature. Terrain never changes. Terrain may change, weather may change, weapons may change, but never human nature." And it really struck home as I was kind of listening to some of the talks here, because we're not going to there goes my drama. Here we go. Because we're not going to talk about technology today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk, and we're not going to talk about ways of managing technology either. We're going to talk about people. As I was explaining to somebody earlier today, about 300 years ago, I retired out of the Army and went to work for an organization called the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon. And there I got the idea for a three-dimensional way to develop cyber talent and cyber organizations, because I just felt that we were taking a way too linear approach to things. Kicked it around for about 10 years, and here we are today. I picked it up about a year ago, and I really started hitting it hard. About a year ago, I was actually thin and had a full head of black hair. Okay, that's how much work I put into this. So, before we move on, of course, the administrivia. So I do have a daytime employer, but this is not on behalf of any other person or organization. And I believe the rest of this basically says, hey, please don't sue me for anything you see here. I find that to be very important. But, as any good presentation should start with, what I'd like to do is to start with a little music. This is going to make sense here in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead. What I'd like to do before we start, I'm going to play you two sounds. Okay, these are chords. And a chord in music is three notes played at the same time. We're going to play the first one, kind of put that into memory, and then we're going to play the second one. What I'd like you to see is see if you can pick out what's different between the two of them. Okay, let's go ahead and play the first one. Okay, everybody got that in upper memory? Okay, let's go ahead and play the second one. Okay. Little different, right? It had a little bit of character to it. You can almost kind of picture like maybe in a soap opera when the main character is told something shocking. They look towards the screen. Has a little movement to it as well. Well, the first chord is a C major chord. It's garden variety. Regardless of what type of music you listen to, I guarantee you that you've heard it before. The second chord is also a C major chord, but we added one note. It's a dissonant note. In music, dissonance is the opposite counterpart to harmony. Now, it can go horribly wrong, don't get me wrong. But as you can hear, sometimes adding that one little dissonant note can add that flavor, can add that movement. Think about this as we continue to talk about people. All of this is going to make sense, more so as we move along, and especially as we start talking about the next case study. So some of you, if you watch or if you read LinkedIn, may have seen this graphic. So in World War II, the Army Air Corps wanted to figure out how to improve the armor on their aircraft. And so as you can see, what they did was they captured the data on where their planes were getting shot up, and they took that data and they sent it to an organization that worked with the military called the Statistical Research Group. And the question was, how much armor should we put on these areas that you're seeing the aircraft is getting shot up at? So it goes over to the Statistical Research Group. As the name implies, these are people who like math for a living. And it landed on an individual's desk named Abraham Wald, a statistician. And he said something that sounds very counterintuitive. He said, do not add armor where you're seeing the aircraft get shot up. Add it where you're not seeing it get shot up. This eventually became known as survivorship bias. Okay, now think about this. Abraham Wald is a statistician. He's not only concerned with the arithmetic, he's also concerned with the population of the data that they're performing the analysis on. And what he basically said was where you don't see the bullet holes or where planes were getting shot up and not making it back. So let's think about that dissonance that we just talked about a couple of minutes ago. What if the Army Air Corps did not add that different way of looking at things? Okay, those different core personal professional attributes, the different knowledge, skills, and ability. What if they just took that and said, well, it's quite obvious exactly what we need to do. We need to add armor in those areas. They would have solved precisely the wrong problem. So this brings us back to people. We're in a very technologically based event here, right? As you're walking down the aisles here, okay, what are we looking at? We're looking at different ways of putting ones and zeros and electrons together and different materials together to put forth an effect. Well, IT, and specifically this model that we're about to talk about today, cybersecurity, it supports that technology, but it is all about the one thing that we can't get around, the one thing that not even AI is going to replace. All the talk today is that as AI moves along, all these jobs are going away, okay? I can tell you it's not the case. Just from my perception, it's not the case. Think about back when they first started automating factories. Okay, the one person turning the wrench and then moving the part down the aisle or down the assembly line stayed around, but their job changed. Now, go back if you're if you have the same amount of gray hair as I do, or even maybe Google this. Think back to the 60s, 70s, and early 80s in IT. Remember back when they used to call IBM Big Blue? Okay, big behemoth. There was a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. Okay, it was a big competitor. They made something called a VAX. And Honeywell was not just the folks that made the thermostats, they were actually the #2 computer company in the United States. Well, when you went to work for organizations like that, you worked for that organization for say 10, 20, 30 years. You spent your entire career just about with those companies. Well, those companies, because they had an opportunity to get the return on investment later, they could actually invest in where you are and where you're going now, because they knew that 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, they were going to get a return on investment. So let me ask you, how long, roughly, do IT professionals spend with a particular company today? Just shout it out. 2, 5, 3 to 5. Okay, depending upon where you are, it's 3 to 5. Obviously, if you're in the federal government, you're a federal employee, it might be a little bit longer. But even there, a lot of folks are starting to move in and out of government, especially with a lot more positions in the federal government moving in and out. Heck, we just had a bunch of lieutenant colonels from Silicon Valley enter. Well, the drawback to that is that the perspective, the time horizon for a lot of these organizations is now way, way, way more compressed. What are the things that we train and develop on? Compliance, okay? Doing your time card. A lot of the other things that these other organizations used to focus on, they would give you, say, LinkedIn Learning and other subscriptions where you can do these things when your really important work is over, which is probably when, do you think? Right. This has caused that long-term, that emphasis on long-term growth of individuals to move from the organizations and go onto the shoulders of the individual, of the person least able to actually make it happen, which is the individual. So what I'm going to propose to everybody here today is that by de facto, it's actually moved on to the profession. Okay, so think about other professions. Now the definition of profession can be a very strict one. We have to have a centralized governing body that basically maintains the quality and adherence to covenants. Obviously in IT, things move way too fast for probably that kind of governing body that you may find in things like medicine and healthcare. And we do have organizations like ISC Squared and ASACA and a lot of the other other organizations like that who are doing their best. But the onus still remains that we still need to think about where somebody is and where they're going, even if they're not going to work for us later on. And in cybersecurity, it's even more important because risk is an ecosystem. Okay, think back to the Colonial Pipeline. Think back to Target. Target was, according to open sources, breached by an HVAC vendor. How many people have heard of the term Log4j? Okay. Those things are part of that risk ecosystem. And because of that risk ecosystem, when somebody moves out and we don't prepare them for where they're going later on, the fact is that risk still stays out there and it accumulates the more individuals that are not prepared. So now that we have this, this more limited view, this more limited aperture, what are the kinds of things that we're encountering in the professional world? Well, the first one is something called the Peter Principle. Back in 1969, a man named Lawrence J. Peter wrote a book called the Peter Principle, where the idea is that as we move from level to level inside of an organization, we move from one level where we're competent to another level where we're competent to eventually the point where we're no longer competent anymore. Now think back. Now think to some of your own experiences. How many people have seen an individual contributor suddenly get thrust into a supervisory or managerial role with no kind of preparation, and they struggled, right? And how many people have seen this, say, with a senior manager moving into an executive role, and maybe they couldn't increase their aperture from that more operational way? Well, that's the Peter Principle, and a couple of the things I can tell you that I've seen over my career is, one, the Peter Principle didn't happen all at once. Okay, it happened over time. That individual was moving in a particular area. We talked about Fox Connor. Fox Connor actually saw Dwight Eisenhower, even though he had never worked for him, and identified that this individual, who, by the way, almost got court-martialed for mishandling a housing reimbursement, was going to have the ability to be very significant in the U.S. Army. Okay, that's the kind of thing that we can see in others, and sometimes we actually kind of sense it. What are we doing now then to think about where they're going to be going? Also, when they get to that point of final placement, it's not fatal. Okay, even when they get to that point of final placement, there is a way to bring them about. Now think about this, when you have a challenging job, isn't that supposed to be a good thing? Well, next is the fact that, let me ask, just to get a sense here, how many people here are in cybersecurity? Okay. Software development? Okay. IT operations? All right. Okay. Program management? Okay. Have you ever noticed that when the GRC folks, the governance, risk, and compliance, the ISSOs, when they start to sit down with the security operations folks, is a bit of a Tower of Babel thing going on? Okay. Well, because we do specialize, what ends up happening is it's that whole idea of where you sit determines where you stand. The GRC folks, they're concerned with what the status of AU7 is, okay, in the security authorization packet. The people in the SOC know that they have a fresh round of indicators of compromise that they need to get into the sensors right now because there is an attack that's right now in the wild. That siloed effort has a tendency to reduce our ability to synergize and to basically bring together all of those capabilities that we're paying so much money for in the organization. In addition, inside of those different silos of excellence or localized pockets of brilliance, we also have the case where you sit determines where you stand, determines that we're all seeing things the same way. Going back to Patton, one of his best quotes that I love is, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody's not thinking. So even in this higher variety, you can also get a case where 99% of the people are seeing 99% of the same thing. Well, what about that 1%? That's where the threat actor lives. That 1% is exactly where the threat actor is going to find and exploit later on. And finally, there's the idea that if we only get one more tool, okay, that one more tool is going to fix everything. AI, as we all know, is going to fix everything. Well, every single one of those tools, those technologies have to be architected. And architecture is not just a technical thing. Architecture is also a people and process thing as well. And if we don't architect the people in the organization, and this doesn't include people who are formally, the employees of the organization. We're also talking partners, we're talking contractors, we're talking people who may be temporarily with the organization. If we don't architect those tools in a holistic sense, then really what we're going to be doing is finding ourselves exactly back to the problem that we had originally. Okay, so here's the solution statement. Okay, these are the things that this model that I'm talking about here today is there to do. One, what if we could get folks to work together better? Not just the hard KSAs, not just the hard knowledge, skills, and ability, like the ability to script with Java, or the ability to manage the model lifecycle management. But what if we could actually get the people in the organization to work together? Peter Drucker has a fantastic saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay, a lot of the people who are going to affect your ability to adapt and to change are not necessarily your formal leaders, but your informal leaders. Okay, that principal engineer that everybody goes to for advice, okay, that's the person who's going to affect your ability to affect change in the organization. What if we can get more out of say the 5 or 6 units of capability, so that it's not just, okay, I have 5 people, I get 5 units of output. What if we could actually get these individuals to work together in such a way that the output actually exceeds the input? Now, just this morning, I realized that for the future iterations of the slide, I'm going to change hiring to talent acquisition. And the reason why is how many does anybody here work in an organization where it's all just the employees of the organization? Say like we have military. Do you have only military in your organization? But yeah, no, you have contractors, you have federal employees, and even the contractors break down. You have federally funded research and development centers like SCI, you have university affiliated research centers. Okay, they all play their different roles. So what if we can create a common understanding of how we're going to work together, not only in the hard skill sets, but also in the human element. Now, we've all heard the horror stories, okay? The incidences of toxicity, the instances of low engagement in organizations is quantitatively increasing. Well, one of the things that drives toxicity is something called imposter syndrome. Now, there are other drivers, but in my research and also in my experience, imposter syndrome is actually the biggest driver. And think back to that Peter principle. Somebody gets to that point where they feel like they may be in a position that's a little beyond them. What do? They hunker down, they get into a defensive crouch, and they build these unconstructive behaviors around them, which cause negative results, negative outcomes in the rest of the organization. Why? Because I can't let people see that I'm imperfect. Well, if you're imperfect, that's an opportunity to get better. That very thing that we're talking about leads to turbulence and turnover. Okay, the more that we reduce an employee or a member's ability to feel like they've really achieved something in the organization, then the more the likelihood that they're going to go ahead and move out the door. That 3 to 5 term can be as little as 18 months to 2 years. If we're losing somebody simply because they're not feeling fulfilled or they don't feel like they're hitting all cylinders in the organization, then we're really missing an opportunity. And I lied about the fact that this is not about technical outcomes, because everything here comes back to technical outcomes. Okay, so these are the 3 pillars of the model that we're going to talk about today. The cyber success model focuses on delivering 3 core results. The first one is synergy. Think about it as kind of a continuum. You have coordination on the one side. Then you have collaboration. Well, synergy is people working together in such a seamless way. Think about that Abraham Wald story with the aircraft, where the output is greater. Instead of maybe 10 units of output for 10 employees, it's 20, it's 30. Okay, this is one of the 3 legs of the stool. The second thing is leadership at all levels of the organization, from the executive level, the executive suite, all the way down to the individual contributors, down to the SOC analyst, the junior SOC analyst at 2 a.m. in the morning. Now, this is twofold. One, we talked about the whole informal leadership and how impactful that is. Think about things like self-organizing teams. But there's also the case of leading ourselves. Sometimes that junior SOC analyst at 2 a.m. in the morning, that person is your decision maker. Okay, that analyst who maybe yesterday was taking a few courses around their working at Starbucks, that might be the person who actually sees that behavior on the network, and that one person, that one very junior individual, could be the difference between you and calamity. And lastly, in cybersecurity, we talked about the whole idea of risk being an ecosystem. Well, one of the things we want to do is to inculcate this idea of risk throughout the organization, because the one biggest difference between cybersecurity and just about every other thing in the organization is that it's adversarial. Okay, in cyber, we still care about things such as service level agreements, okay, functionality, quality attributes, those sorts of things. We care about them like anything else, mainly because that goes to availability. Think about it: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But the fact is, there's a bad guy or bad girl out there, okay? There's something out there that wants to do us harm and reduce that confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Might not even be human, okay? Could be a wildfire, could be a hurricane. Okay, think back to Hurricane Katrina and all of the different server rooms that were knocked out during that time. Not due to any, and a lot of them not due to any bad decisions. Just simply that the risk had cascaded to such a point where it exceeded their ability to prior plan. Pause for dramatic effect. So this is the core of the model. So in the title, I talked about the Defense Cyber Workforce Framework. That's in here. But what I did was, as I was looking at this, I said, you know, people are three-dimensional. People are in movement. So what I did was I identified three different attributes, three different aspects of developing not only individuals, but also developing organizations. And I know we have some mathy folks in here, so I'm going to use the word vector. This is not a mathematical vector, not yet. But if we have these three aspects that we're taking into account and we triangulate on them, now we have a vector. A vector is a line that starts in one point and extends out into infinity, okay, into a certain direction. Now, it's not mathematical, as I said before, okay, it is figurative. I hope to get it mathematical at a certain point in time. But this is how I think that we actually build out those things that we were talking about in the previous slide: synergy, pervasive leadership, and a risk-centered mindset. One of the things that I saw that we were missing is a conversation about what makes a professional who they are, okay? So what I did was I basically affinity grouped a number of different models: the Army Leader Requirements Model, Marine Corps Principles, Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, even Confucianism, to kind of pull out, well, what makes a professional successful in an organization. And then what I did was I looked at the NICE framework, which is from NIST, and it basically takes a number of different work roles and breaks down, okay, these are the tasks that they ought to be able to do. Here are the knowledge items, here are the skill items. The Defense Cyber Workforce Framework is the DoD taking that and extending it out. They actually did a really good job with it, and expanding it out into things like AI, offensive cyber operations. But still, it was a case where it was still one-dimensional. It didn't take into account the fact that we're going to be moving up, okay? And in addition to that, I also thought that we needed another direction which is going to move us, create that movement in that particular area. So it's not just a point in time. It's not just that we're taking an attribute or a KSA. It's not just that we're deciding where how it should express themselves at that particular organization, but it's also determining where are they now, and where do we want them to be. Now, this isn't to beat somebody over the head, okay? This is to develop them. If I have the delta between where they are and where they need to be, now I can push them in that direction, and we have a common understanding. So let's go a little bit deeper into the three different axes. The first one is the breadth axis. What we did is we took that left-leaning axis, okay, and we rotated it 90 degrees. So the basic professional attributes, you know, if you're in the military, this should look very, very familiar, okay? In the Army, we used to call it be, know, do, right? Well, as I left and went out into the private sector, I've seen a hesitance to really talking about this, and especially if you're dealing with, say, external partners, contractors, and whatnot. There's been a hesitancy to say, well, they're not my people, so I really can't talk about, you know, what kind of professional they could be. Well, you can talk about the effect on your organization, because the effects of things like communication and candor, problem definition and solution development. I actually separated those two out. Empathy and concern for others, execution and results orientation. You can talk about the effects on your organization, because I have had contract organizations that have worked for me that their internal problems cascaded into my organization, and I've also had the other way around. Next, what if we go and take the knowledge, skills, and ability in the Defense Cyber Workforce Framework, and what if we found the ones that were common across all the different work roles? Well, what I could do now is to create kind of a Rosetta Stone for everybody. Say network protocols, for instance. There's the TCP/IP stack, the whole IP address and things like that. Well, the network engineer obviously should be a master in that, but the program manager should at least be able to understand what it is and what it actually means to them. Well, if I identify these core IT capabilities, and in there I also lumped in some of the acquisition KSAs as well, because when you look at the model, it's IT acquisition. Well, now what we can do is we can plan for things like training, like mentoring. If we have one individual who is really good in one of these particular areas, now we can use them to mentor other people in the organization. That's that whole moving ahead. Now we can get to the whole adversarial nature of cybersecurity. Risk, 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 risk. Risk is a threat actor, the active component of the risk that wants to do you harm. The vulnerability, which is the passive condition that they want to affect. Together, that becomes the likelihood or the threat. And then you have the impact. Now, that impact is, if that thing were to come about, what's the impact to the mission? Not the web server, not the firewall, not the router. What's the impact to the mission if that were to happen? So this core cyber area and its focus on risk management is what takes the more foundational elements and now puts on top of it the fact that there is somebody or something that wants to do bad to my mission, and now I can start to rack and stack based upon my understanding of these threats and vulnerabilities and impacts to the mission, and get a common understanding across the organization in terms of priority. So let's say, for instance, you're a software developer. If I were able to give you a stack of things that I think needs to be done, but I tie them to a risk based upon what's actually happening out in the wild, and you have to think about, well, should I add this new piece of functionality to this application, or should I sanitize this data entry point, which wasn't originally sanitized? Wouldn't it kind of help if I were able to provide you a risk-based way of looking at these things? Hey, if this thing doesn't get done, Rome will fall. If this doesn't get done, Rome won't fall, okay, but it could be damaged later on. Now don't you have the ability to make decisions for yourself in a way that has a common understanding? These bottom three, you want to do this across the organization. You want to be relatively consistent across the organization in identifying what you want. So there is a book, which I'm going to give you the QR code at the end, that covers all this, where I identified 30 core professional attributes. Please, for the love of all things good and holy, do not use all 30. In fact, as you're pulling out these professional attributes, these core IT knowledge, skills, and ability, these core cyber skills and ability, make sure it's something you can manage on a day-to-day basis, okay? The worst thing you can do is to not use the model, but rather let the model use you, okay? There's a quote by George E.P. Box where he says, all models are wrong, but some are useful, okay? This is not here to give you the answer. It's here to help organize your thinking. Start small and then work your way out, okay? So when I correlated the NICE framework, I found 16 core IT and 16 core cyber KSAs. Make it more, make it less, do what works for you. And now we get into what actually is required for that particular position. Now you're into the H's. You've built a foundation, and now you're getting into the security operations specialist. The legal counsel, there's actually one of those in the framework, the people who actually help you and advise you on legal matters. And then there's also the fact that a lot of times we have additional duties, okay? At an organization called LearnerLine, I ran a school of cybersecurity in addition to consultants, pen testers, and the like. Well, what we did was we actually took the folks that did this stuff on a day-to-day basis and had them teach classes. So if you have somebody who has an alternate specialty, now you can also call that out as well. And we can also think about where that individual might be in the future. So the grades down below, so what I did was I just took some military, the various military grades, the various GS, federal employee grades, and I basically, I came up with, well, what if? Okay, so this was just my dirty beer math way of putting these down in a particular organization. And now some of these positions are supervisory that you see off to the right. Some of them are non-supervisory. But this is just an example, whether you're private sector and you're thinking in terms of senior manager, executive, principal, or whether you're military and you think in terms of GS levels, and you think in terms of military pay grades. If we can figure out, now we've gone from that breadth where we've identified those items and now said, okay, now this person's at a level which is more tactical than it is strategic. We want them to have an idea as to where it all fits in, but we really need them focused on the H's. Or we can say, let's go all the way over to the right here, executives. How many, the scenario I use is just picture somebody standing in the middle of a forest fire holding a burning twig, going, somebody put this burning twig out. Well, that's somebody who's not thinking strategically, okay? So if we can think about where their mental model, the mental model that's called for at their level, now we can put everything into perspective, and it takes us to this area. So this is called Bloom's taxonomy. Educators have been using this for decades to determine if somebody is somebody's taking a class in a particular area and there are certain educational objectives. Where should they be after the class is taken? Well, I was looking for a number of different ways for me to break down that Z-axis, that one that would provide motion. And I looked at, okay, apprentice, journeyman, master, no, that's not very granular. Beginner, intermediate, expert, nah. I mean, what's the big problem there? If somebody were to ask you the definition of medium, and I were to hand out pieces of paper, everybody here would have wildly different definitions of what intermediate meant. Well, here it's actually tied to something. So at the remember level, I've heard it, okay? I may not totally get it, but I've heard it. Okay, at understand, okay, I heard it, I get it, but at apply is where I can actually take a procedure and do it. And as I move up, I get to create, okay? And this is where we get to the illusory like CW5s, okay? Warrant Officer 5s in the military. The people they say exist, but no one's actually seen one. Not real, not close up. The people who are actually able to string things together and to create something totally new. That's the Jedi level at this point. Now, so how you would put this together, so we have a real life person, Mabel Snickerdoodle, okay? This person actually exists. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a profile of where we need Mabel to be. Now she's a director of security operations, so on that scope level, she's at level 7. Okay, so she's right before executive, all right? And she's over security operations. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that x-axis, and now we're going to start breaking out those attributes and those KSAs. So as an example, let's take self-regulation and professional bearing. Now this is something we want everybody to have, maybe just in different levels. Now, Mabel here is a director, first off. Second off, she's the director of security operations. Now, how this particular professional attribute manifests itself may be different based upon where she is and what she's doing. Again, use the model, don't let the model use you. When I was at Carnegie Mellon, it was a regular thing where I would go up to somebody and I would say, like, have you ever said something like Agile-ish to somebody who's an Agile proponent? I don't know if they still do this or not, but I remember they would jump you because it's either Agile or it's not Agile. Not the case here. It works for you or it doesn't work for you. So, knowledge of IT acquisition and procurement. Now we've put this in IT. Now, mind you, this is based on cyber. You could do this breakdown for any particular type of position. You could do this for financial folks, accountants. Okay, we're just doing this in terms of cyber and IT folks. Okay, we have knowledge of risk management processes. I think we've nailed that home. Now, after we've gone through these things that we said are common across the organization, now for her specific position, we pulled out ones. One of them is knowledge of network traffic analysis. Now, remember, this is a big list of attributes and KSAs. That's why reusing the first 3 levels gives you the ability to spend more time on the things that are that may be specific to a particular position. So we've used that one particular set of time to determine what the first 3 levels should be, and now we get into the eaches for levels 4 and 5. Again, we come back to that example of that company I used to work for, where we had people who also did training. Well, maybe we want to do that for Mabel as well. But now here's where frameworks like the Defense Cyber Workforce Framework and NICE, this is where I find them kind of limited. They just say, you need to have this, okay? It's not really quite enough to be able to determine where somebody is and where somebody should be. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go down the road here, and because she's a director, and because she is also over the security operations center, we want her pretty high, second to the top, evaluate. Okay, we need her to be able to hold it together because she's going to be under a lot of stress. Now for IT acquisition, maybe in this organization, we need her to understand the concept, but we don't really, somebody else is going to handle that. Or maybe we actually do need her to have a bigger understanding of how IT acquisition is actually performed. Again, it's got to work for your organization and your culture. Now, she's in the Security Operations Center. She's got to be able to apply risk management principles, but we don't necessarily need her to be the risk executive management function for the organization. We do need her to be able to take, say, a risk register and determine what her priorities are going to be for the Security Operations Center. So we're going to have her right in the middle here. Okay, level 3 is apply. Means I have a procedure, I can follow the procedure. Now for network of traffic analysis, it's core to security operations, but we have principals who work for her, right? We have those people who are Jedis who may be at the levels, at the create and evaluate levels. We may be tempted to tell Mabel that she needs to be perfect in everything. It's counterproductive, okay? We need her to be able to focus. We need her to be able to be exposed to certain things, be creative and make functional choices on things. So we need to be able to communicate to Mabel and whoever may come up behind Mabel, because maybe Mabel moves on to another organization, what the expectations are and how we want to get her there. And then finally, we get to the whole training piece, okay, where we say, we need to be able to give you a training class and follow it. So now we're back to that whole apply level. Now again, this is going to be a larger swath of different things, but by aggregating things across the organization, now you're able to use your time wisely, because yes, this is a little bit of upfront work, but after you've developed it and after you put it into play, now it's just a case of caretaking. Now it's just a case of tweaking and discussing what it is that we've already talked about. This is how we maintain energy down that vector. We've talked about where we want them to be. We've broken that down into plans. We've not only determined what the attributes and KSAs are, but we've also identified, well, what are the goals to get you there? Again, this person may be exceeding where we want them to be in a particular area. That goal might be to help other people. There might be areas where we need them to be better at. Think about that whole imposter syndrome that we were talking about earlier. What if we were to identify that and get them mentorship on the job? So we identify the plan, and then we actually do it. This is more of a value chain than a, now I'm planning, now I'm growing, now I'm reflecting. It's, these things will fold into each other. And lastly, with the reflect piece, we have to build this into our schedules. We have to build time in to take a step back and say, where have we been over the course of time? The research has shown that this is probably the most important part of the whole process, because now when we take a step back, the sequential parts of our minds take a break, take a knee, and then the parallel parts of our mind take over and start to creatively think about where are we now and where are we want to go. It may be we want an entirely new plan. That is in the mix. Okay, so as we sum up, the biggest thing I have to say is, as you're looking at implementing some of this, use the model. Don't let the model use you. Okay. Yes, there will be amount of effort up front, but start small. Start where you are. Start with maybe a few attributes, get everybody on the same sheet of music, and then maybe build your way out. Okay. So that's the book that contains all of it. Okay. So I actually go into, and so if you go to this, so if you go to this part on the website as well, the slides are up there. So I go down through all 30 attributes and show you exactly what they are and how they might be implemented in a cyber and IT environment. It's available on Amazon, and because this is very dense subject matter, I tried to make it entertaining. Okay, I think I was successful in certain areas, but you can't talk about defense cyber workforce framework, defense cyber workforce development, and make it, I don't know, make it be a roller coaster ride of fun. Okay, but I think I got pretty far. Okay, on LinkedIn there is a newsletter to this. So the next one that I'm going to be writing on is problem definition and solution development, and how they're not actually the same thing. So as I'm going to be publishing this here. Now, the last item, you see there are 2 QR codes. I'm a cyber guy. Do not scan a QR code unless you're sure that the person who's providing it to you is trustworthy and that they are able to protect the QR code from having malicious logic injected in it. So I'm going to leave you with that paradox. Okay. So, what's that?
I said, come on.
So yeah, that's the paradox. By all means, scan the QR code, but be careful scanning the QR code. That's every cyber person ever, right? Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open this up for discussion and for questions. Yes, ma'am. Oh, do we have a microphone? Oh. Oh, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So I was just curious about the DoD CIO. She's rolling out DCWF work roles across DoD, but is this something that we're going to have flexibility as companies? We own a company, right? Or and are we supposed to determine what work role, or would you recommend us asking our government customer how they align it? Because there's a lot of ambiguity around it right now.
Yeah.
And I also noticed that on the DoD website, they don't have all the updated DCWF work roles. So we have been creating our own spreadsheet of every one. And we also incorporate it into our, we have a software, our human capital management, where, we are constantly trying to mentor and we track that. But what would you recommend?
So the fact is that, okay. So the fact is that the work roles are not always going to line up appropriately. So just on my own job, I had a requirement to recruit a data engineer with an AI background. Okay, there is a data operations specialist, and then there is an AI ML specialist, in addition to like 5 or 6 other AI related things. It's going to be very common where you're going to have to take different work roles and kind of create a Franken work role. I would strongly doubt that the government will do that. What I would generally do is I would create the profile, and I would share that with the government and say, is this kind of what you're looking for? Generally, what they're going to do is they're going to tweak it here and there. Some of them may be like, okay, this is too much. You actually went way far beyond what we were actually, wanting to do in terms of detail. You can't lose by doing this and then saying, this is what we're thinking. Yeah, exactly. I would create the profile, and I also let them know. I also let them know where it came from. And here's the other thing too: don't be afraid to create. If there is a particular KSA that is not in the framework at all, but you know they need, don't be afraid to create it. So on the NIST side, they're like, have at it, be creative. I haven't seen much on the defense side in terms of guidance. 800-181, which is the NIST guidance, is all about make it your own. Yeah, yeah. So the bottom line is the best thing I can say to do is to create the profile and then provide it to them and then use that as your, it's kind of like in football, they send in a play, but the quarterback can audible. Yeah, yeah. And it's just as long as, just speaking as a contractor, that you're not like, this is what we're giving you and you have no choice. As long as you're saying, hey, this is a basis of conversation, there are not too many folks on the government side that I've come across that aren't like, oh, wow, yeah, I like what you did here. Yeah, I've actually done this a few times and showed it to the government, and at least my government customer has every time has been, oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
Becoming standard. So a new one was just released September 30th. And they're expanding more roles, bearing in mind that you can hold multiple roles simultaneously. So it's not about creating a one necessarily Franken role, but about applying each role that should apply to the role. And what should be happening is we don't live in the world that should. But what is supposed to happen, and what I know some government customers are now doing, is in fact, if you look at your PWS, they're adding it. It's not in the PWS. My current PWS on the contract I'm on references both 8570 and 8140 because they knew that they weren't ready for 8140, but they put it in there, and then when they got the role defined, they just did a contract mod that only added that role, so that my COR's on it. But as we're especially in the NetCom realm, if you're working with the Army, especially those organizations that are familiar with cyber workforce, they were aware 5 years ago that they weren't ready when they rolled it out for GS civilians and green suiters. But the government is aware and they are moving in that direction. So if you're not seeing it now, I would anticipate seeing it in the near future. And don't be surprised when you have 2, 3, 4 roles under the cyber workforce. Just plan for that.
Where I found the greatest benefit to this is with our recruiters. Let me give this just in case. Okay. No? Okay. So with recruiters, okay, thank you. So with recruiters, generally you have HR, very HR oriented folks, and now you're saying, go out and find me an AI engineer. I'm cyber, okay? I've stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I know generally like what the risks of AI are, but even myself can find it a little bit tough. When I took this breakdown and then broke it down by, hey, the team leader should have these attribute levels, should be apply here, evaluate here, and hand it off to the recruiter. At first, I thought the recruiter was going to be like, oh my God, you just basically, threw a grenade at me. They loved it because now the recruiter is able to actually look at what's in the, what the different job boards are, and also when you're talking to people, can say, hey, would you, in this particular area, what would you say, are you able to say this about what you're able to do? And now we've actually empowered them to actually give us folks where it's not, it's kind of like, it's not kind of like, hey, this isn't exactly the person we're looking for. Yes, ma'am.
No, I was gonna say there's a few points that I wrote down some amazing lines, like the junior SOC at 2 a.m. might be the decision maker. Some of the areas where I'm noticing, at least in the public sector, is everyone kind of passes it on and says, I'm not the decision maker. But then giving that, ownership on, some of those folks that they're able to contribute so much to an organization, that's, amazing. Just even that, hearing that from you, I just want to say that's really incredible.
Well, and just a caveat on that is also, thank you, is knowing what part of the decision's theirs. That is so incredibly important. If you're the junior SOC analyst at 2 a.m. and you're there all by yourself, you have a thing which is your decision, but it may not necessarily be, okay, we're going to put a block in the firewall. That might not be in your scope, but maybe declaring an incident, maybe that is in your scope. And there's actually an example that I use from the movie Master and Commander in the book, where, and how many people have ever seen the movie Master and Commander? Okay. So there's a scene there that I talk about, and then I relate it to that junior analyst at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I think that's, so absolutely, thank you for bringing that up.
So as you were speaking, I started out trying to do what you guys were doing and match this against the DCWF, which I'm very familiar with. And as you talked, I had to kind of transition it into more of a developmental model for how to actually give them information on where they need to go. And like you said initially, translate that onus on preparedness from the individual to the corporation, to the leaders actually giving you the pathway to where you need to be. With the analyzed and set breadth levels and how deep I need you to have an understanding, is your recommendation when applying this that they do not move on to the next level of breadth until they reach the required level of depth? Or do you tackle them at the same time and simultaneously as needed?
So I would recommend being very flexible, at least initially. So when you first put this into play, there's going to be a lot of, we call it in the Army, dirty beer bath. Okay, there's going to be a lot of kind of triangulating on things, and there are going to be different levels of perception as to, what is analyze, what is evaluate. One of the things that I want to get to with this model is there's something called psychometrics. I know what it is, I don't know how to do it. I have a friend, I'm sorry? So kind of, it's, so the people who write, thank you so much. The people who write tests, especially the computer adaptive tests, the people who write the test are psychometricians. And so if you notice, if you take a computerized adaptive test, it gets harder as you're answering more questions, and it gets easier because it's kind of bracketing in what you know. So eventually, what I would like to do is to take this out of simply the manual qualitative type of thing and to start collecting the data that says this is what evaluate looks like today and this is what it might look like in the future. One of the things, though, I would very much warn is, so, and in the book I have a whole chapter on maturity. The maturity model, in my opinion, this whole idea of, okay, I do it, I do the right things, I make the right things stick across the organization, and I do it better. The maturity model, I think, is the one of the best things ever to come down the pipe. The problem is how we execute it. If you hear a lot of people talk about blowing up the NIST RMF, I hate that because the NIST RMF has the nuggets of being very useful. So one of my past organizations who decided to use NIST but weren't required to follow FISMA, what we did was we broke the authorization cycle down into bite-sized chunks. So instead of doing an entire thing, security authorization packet at once, we broke it down to, okay, we're going to do this, authorize it, do this, authorize it, do this, authorize it. So the point I'm making is, in implementing this model, be careful against getting so pedantic in its execution that you actually, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You kill the very thing that you're trying to improve, which is the person. Compliance, in my opinion, is almost the enemy of maturity. And that's why it's probably good to push the conversation with your client and get out ahead of it in such a way that you're pulling them along with you, and not a case of, well, I get this thing here, I have to comply with it. Because if you can create something which is developmental throughout the whole entire life cycle of the organization, now you can actually develop people who are aware your customer needs them before they need them, and you can bring in partners that actually add kind of that Abraham Wald thing that I was talking about, that dissonance that can attach to your organization in a very seamless but very fruitful kind of way. Yeah, so again, I can't stress it enough. Use the model, don't let the model use you. Sure.
Okay, one more, and then
Sure.
I'll shut up. But okay, curious to know if when you're trying to find out the breadth and depth and where they're at,
Sure.
is there anything out there that has screening assessments that instead of us crafting our own, there isn't? Okay. You're trying to do it.
I'm it.
Okay.
And I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
So this whole idea of this, okay, good. Let me, so this whole idea of this three-dimensional thing, I haven't seen it anywhere else. And trust me, the whole reason why I put the whole TM on here is because I wanted to stake a claim to the concept, and I didn't want anybody suing me if I stepped on somebody else's IP. But I've looked far and wide on this, and I have not found any IP out there that does this. And this is really a passion project. So of the book, I can tell you I'm not going to retire on the proceeds of the book. This is very much a case of me seeing what's going on in the profession and going, hey, I want to help. I have a way that I think we can do this better. And that's really what this is all about. I haven't seen it. Because Lord knows, if somebody, I'm all for using other people's stuff.
Quick.
Yeah, I'm all for using other people's stuff. That's why I didn't roll my own with those top 4 levels of the x-axis. Hey, because I was actually on the NICE working group for a while there, and they're working hard. I think they're doing fantastic work. I think the folks that worked on the DCWF, I think, took it to the next level. I really do. Well, I think part of the problem is, and I think you see it here. And I think you see it in a lot of technological-based conversations where we get so caught up in the technology that we lose the human animal behind the technology. I can tell you that I'm so a matter of fact, my last article was where I was saying I feel like I'm selling broccoli at the Cheesecake Factory because this is definitely not the sexiest, most glamorous part of cybersecurity. Talking about how to develop cyber professionals, but I look at what we do. I mean, we manage the means of production of our 21st century economy. Shouldn't we every single day walk in and go, wow, did we just nail it today or what? And I just don't think we are. And I think we can. Yes, sir.
Quick question, where do the professional certifications come into play with this? You know, like for example, 8570, you know, was a requirement to have your CompTIA Security Plus fulfilled.
Yeah, so I didn't, so the question was, where do the certifications come into play? Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I didn't go there. And the reason why I didn't go there was in order to use this on the certifications, you have to get down to brass tacks. And you have to be able to break down the different certifications in this kind of way. The certification, it didn't line up exactly from the top end, if that makes sense. You had to actually be able to have the resources and the time to actually sit down and go through not only the subject matter, but how they actually test it out. And that was fraught with so much. Well, first off, it's very resource intensive, and I'm a resource of one. But also, you start getting into people's IP, and especially testing IP, and they get really, really testy. Just recently, I retook my CISSP, I got the ISSMP, and I got the C-RISC, and I flunked the PMP, and I decided I'm never going after it again, because I was crushing it, but I had to move so fast that I said, no, I don't want this to be so ingrained into how I think. But I say that to say so much is built into that psychometrics that we're talking about of the testing that it just seemed like a quagmire to get into at this point.
I think culturally that's part of the problem, right? Is there's an expectation that you're going to have a professional certification, you're going to be funded, whether it's CompTIA, regardless of what it is.
Yep. And
that's the organization's way of mitigating that liability. They say, well, these employees right here, they have 8570 or 8140, whatever it is, requirements, and we're meeting those needs through those certifications. But I think to your point, and from what we're seeing here, it lacks because it's a checkbox, and so organizationally it doesn't actually build you for long-term sustainability. It's just a checkbox. And that's where I could see a lot of the different elements you're bringing together could add value. But
yeah, and that's exactly what I'm fighting against. Is what I'm talking about here is very diagnostic, and it kind of does what a lot of what the certifications do in a point in time, according to a very specific thing. One of the things that I talk about in here is that I talk about in the book is interviewing. So I don't hit on the certifications at all, not because I'm for or against. I think they're great for telling you where the person's baseline is. So if somebody has a CISSP, you know they're at least here in terms of what they know. Exactly. ISSMP here, but not over here. That's the ISSEP. So I think it's great for creating a floor, but it's everything above there. And one of the things I talk about in my book is I don't support the whole hey, give me an example of a time when you did XYZ in the past, because the reason being is I generally tend to find those answers are very, very rehearsed. They're already coming with those examples. So what I want to know is I use forward-looking hypotheticals. So I give them a scenario that may or may not be in the job they might be going for. And I tell them, please use some examples of how you've done this in the past to support it. But I want to see how they think their way through it. And I'll actually introduce a paradox where I might say, what if somebody asks you to do something that's unauthorized but helps the mission, right? And now we're getting to the crux of risk management, because I want to see, are they going to sit back and go, oh, it's unauthorized, you're going to talk to my supervisor. Well, as your prospective supervisor, thank you very much. Or are they going to sit back and go, well, what effect are you trying to achieve? Maybe we can do this in a secure way. And I've actually used scenarios which had nothing to do with the job that they're going for. One of the examples that I used previously was you're supporting a system that monitors crop health in third world nations. Not because that's what they were going to do, but because I wanted them to think through the process, ask me questions, because at the end of the day, we might give them something just that off the wall. I want to hear the questions and what are the things that they're going to align first, second, third, fourth. Those are the things that, to me, in addition to reasonable practical exercises, very, very reasonable practical exercises, gives me an idea of are you what your resume says you are? And this, in a way, is something that goes to that. I can pick out, okay, these are the really main things that I want to get after and I want to see. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. All right, well, we shut the place down.